Our next speaker, Parisa Abedi Khoozani. She is doing her postdoc at York University in Canada. And her talk is titled Building a Convolutional Neural Network to Study the Combination of allocentric and egocentric information. Stage is yours.
Yep. Okay. Let me share my screen. And what also I want to add. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for attending this session. In this part, I am going to quickly explain our project, which is at very early stages in understanding how allocentric and egocentric information are combined in the brain. So when planning to reach to a visual target, one can code the spatial position of the object with regard to body parts, for example, here with regard to the hand, or can code the information with regard to the other objects in the surrounding area, which the second one is called allocentric coding and the first one is called egocentric coding. And many studies, both behavioral and neurophysiology studies, show that actually this allocentric and egocentric information are combined for reaching purposes. For example, one of the recent studies by my colleague in Dr. Crawford's lab, when they recorded the activity in the frontal eye field of monkeys, they showed that the motor codes, in the motor code, there is an embedded allocentric information. So more specifically, what they did, they trained monkeys to reach to remembered position of targets in the presence of allocentric landmarks. So let's go through the task very quickly together. So here in the first image, the monkeys are trained to fixate on the orange dot, and the landmarks are presented as two crossing lines. And after a fixation period, the target appears as the white dot here, close to the landmarks, and then disappears after 100 milliseconds. And after the delay period, a mask appears, so both landmark and target, everything disappears. And after random delay, now the landmark again appears on the screen. And it could be in two different conditions, either in the same position as previous image or as a shifted position in different direction. And what they found, and then the monkey, of course, was trained to reach to the remembered position of the target when the fixation was disappeared. So what they found is that similar to human behavioral studies, also the gaze position, the final gaze position of the monkey was shifted toward the shifted landmark position, which is showing the influence of the landmarks. And this shift was around 30%. And when they look at the single neuron activity, they found that the early visual responses were coding mostly information in egocentric frame, here eye-centered coordinate. But when they look at the later responses or motor responses, what they found is that those codes showing, again, mainly coding in egocentric, but within that coding was embedded about 30% shift toward the allocentric coding. And this was an indicator of the presence of allocentric coding also in the brain for reaching purposes. However, while all these studies showing the effect of allocentric information, it's not clear how and where in the network this combination might happen. So this is the goal of this study. And previously for egocentric framework, neural networks were a very useful tool to provide insights of like how these processes can happen. And our goal in this project is to use the same methodology. So there are several challenges that we first need to tackle. The first thing, so as I said, we are using neural network, but before I can go into the architecture, I'm going to quickly explain what type of signal we are feeding to the network and expecting from the network to generate. So since our goal is to replicate the result by my colleague, similarly, we will provide a visual input. Here, images with the landmark and target position. And then if you remember, we had two different images. One was landmark and target, and one only with the landmark. And in the first atom of our project, we are only interested in the special coding. And so we remove the temporal aspect of this coding. And for that reason, currently we are just stacking up the two images together. We hope to add recurrency or recurrent connection later on to our network. But so this would be our visual input. And in order to dissociate between egocentric and allocentric, then we varied the initial gaze position, and accordingly we varied our visual input to replicate the retinal projection as an input for our network. So these are the two input. And finally, to make it more neurophysiologically feasible, we expect our network to generate the motor output similar to the FEF motor responses that my colleague recorded. So this would be a population code of the final gaze position. To very quickly go through the architecture that we are proposing here. So since we have images here, we are using convolutional neural networks to extract the information from images. And what we are doing here, we are just trying to replicate early visual responses. So we are aiming to use physiologically feasible. So here we use only two convolution layers. We use Gabor filters, different orientation, to kind of model the simple cells. And then we have rectification, normalization, and special pooling, and again Gabor filters. But before flattening the image to fit it to the final part of our network, then we included a feature pooling. And this part is the only part that we train in our convolutional network. And this part is the part that we allow our network to be selective and choose which feature map among all the feature map that was generated using our Gabor filters it wants to combine and generate the abstract feature maps of the visual input. And then we use this initial gaze position with the extracted information from the images, fit that to a two-layer fully connected network in order to generate the final motor output. And this part is the part that we are planning to analyze to compare with the processes that is happening in the brain. Here, what I did, and so I just finished designing the network. Here, this is a very simple or very early result of the network performance. And what I did is that I got the population code and used a linear decoder to transform that into 2D gaze positions. And in the y-axis, I'm plotting the predicted gaze position from my network, and the x-axis now I'm plotting the desired gaze position based on the simulation data I generated, again, based on the behaviors. And you can see that the network is trainable and it can predict. And the next step for our network is now to analyze and go inside the individual units and compare them with the behavior of the network. And since my time is up, I would like to thank my co-authors and my lab member and the funding agencies. And now I'm open to questions for anyone who is interested to go deeper into the architecture of the network. Thank you.
Thank you, Parisa. And currently, we don't have any questions in the question and answer panel. And please post your questions in the panel so that we can go through it. We have actually time for plenty of questions. And could you please give us, could you please explore your network a little bit more, because it seems like you just go through it very shortly.
Yeah, so actually the network, the kind of maybe the main part of the network. So the goal of this is to create a model which is like replicating the brain as much as it's possible. So it's not like about like training just a convolution network to do a classification. So what we did is here I'm just giving a quick overview of the convolution part. Again, just a big picture. And so if this is my if this is the heat map of my input, this would be the final output of my network. It's kind of resized and creates a Gaussian like kind of activity of all of these pixels. And you can see that around the the allocentric part and the target part, now I have higher activation. So one of the main part or challenges of this project was that to train it or to create the architecture that is more physiologically understandable. So if I go through it, so here, what I'm showing is that how I'm performing the convolution, rectification, normalization, and pooling. And as I said, I'm just simply using some Gabor filters. These are all predefined. And so Gabor filters are like they can just, here in this example, extract the orientation of the line for us. So if I have the example of like only having 2 lines here, so the first one would like, let's say, extract the vertical and horizontal. And then with this repeated filtering that we have here, and has been shown that this can be a process that is happening in the early visual areas, then I can create like feature maps with the combination of different line orientation. And this is the part that we allow our network now to choose. For example, if we have only like horizontal and vertical crosses or any other direction. So this is the part that our network will be trained to create the abstract features. And why we are selecting this and why this is important is that if you think about coordinate transformation, is that we have many options. And the issue in the brain is that we don't know what to look for and we don't know where to look for it. And by creating such a thing, what we are planning to see is that at what stage this information is coded. Is it like this allocentric information present all over the network, and at some point do they use it or not using it? So I didn't have the time to go through some of the results, but when we looked at fully connected layers, what we did, if we just extract here, if I go through like the weights, and what I can see is that from the early ones on my fully connected layer, I can see the presence of the crosses into the weights. So I can see that the network is in a distributed fashion, trying to extract this crosses position with regard to the target position and pass it to the other layers. So the next step for us would be for sure to just try now to simulate a situation that no allocentric information is coded and see if again this would be persistent in the network or not.
Thank you. One of our panelists audience is asking, Akea Labash is asking, was the images introduced to the network as RGB or binary?
No, they are binary. Right now they are binary, so they are not RGB.
Do you think it will make a big differences?
If I introduce them as RGB? No, I don't think so. The plan is, interestingly, no one studied that as a frame of like allocentric coding. So this is the first step. But I know that in naturalistic images, the first image I showed you, that when it was like actual object and we have data, human data. And the next step is for our project is actually to then train them on naturalistic objects. And so that would be the next step for our project. But as I said, the main goal for us first now is that when we train the monkeys, we want to see what signal we should look for in the brain, what type of coordinate phrase we should expect to find in the brain, and which areas are the most probable to code those information for us.
That sounds very interesting. And thank you very much for your talk. Again, if you have any more questions for Parisa, please just type them in the question and answer panel. Parisa will be around to answer them. And now we will move on to our third speaker,